Filing for bankruptcy? Got that in your mind to file a bankruptcy? Well, we're gonna cover everything that I know about bankruptcies, how to file them, what you're doing, and how to navigate that space in this video, so let's dive into it. Bankruptcies. So this is probably one of the topics that we haven't covered too in depth, mostly because, I filed for bankruptcy what feels like a long time ago, 10 plus years ago. We'll just leave it at that, okay? And so a lot's changed since then, and I don't wanna, talk about something that I don't know and I don't understand. So today, we're gonna talk about it, because I know somebody who filed last year and got discharged this year, okay? And they gave me all the juicy details, or as much as they possibly could remember, and I'm gonna share that with you in this video. So let's start at the very top. What are your options for filing bankruptcy? Let's start there. Okay, I went ahead and cheated and used ChatGPT, and so we've got 3, which the only 2 that you need to really worry about is 7 and 13. So Chapter 7, which is a complete liquidation, and Chapter 13, which is a repayment plan. Now, the only real big difference that I've noticed between these 2 and talking to a bankruptcy lawyer, it was that everyone kind of starts at a 7, and if you have too much assets that are public that they can go and find, then what they might try and do is push you into a 13, which a 13 is just a repayment plan. So as you can see on the screen here, 7 is completely liquidation and a 13 is essentially restructuring and repaying, meaning that you don't get out of it, okay? And so those are the primary 2 that individuals have, and then an 11 has to do more with business. But let's talk about why people want to file for bankruptcy, and I think some misconceptions there. So my issue with bankruptcies is that it fails to really teach accountability. And here's what I mean is, and I did this, by the way, so I'm speaking completely from firsthand experience, is it was just like this. I was in my 20s. I was like, oh my gosh, the banks are so stupid. They're giving me money. This is free money. I'm gonna spend it however I like. Payment schedule became whenever I felt like doing it. Do I have the money this month? No, I won't pay this month. Late payments galore, collections, like all the worst stuff, you name it, I did it, okay? And so then I was just like, oh, well, it's so bad, so I'll just file bankruptcy, like, no big deal. And so then I was able to file bankruptcy and essentially liquidate and wipe off all that debt and start over. And so the issue, though, is that, first off, knowing that I can do that, I didn't try that hard. I didn't try that hard to come up with a debt repayment plan or some sort of debt consolidation loan or go to a debt management company and have them try and fight on my behalf to consolidate down everything and make structured payments. I didn't do any of that. I just let it get out of hand, dug the hole deeper and deeper, and then finally just said, wipe my hands of it and do bankruptcy. Now, obviously bankruptcy is different today. There is also too some things that you cannot discharge, and we'll cover that in a second. But overall, that whole structure just doesn't really teach much, does it? And yes, they make you go through credit course now, a couple different courses and classes to re-educate you. It's too little, too late, is what I feel like. And so a lot of times people feel like they're getting away with something, like they just, they won the lotto or something, or they won all this free money and stick it to the banks. You actually didn't win at all. You lost. You lost all the time and stress and energy and pressure of getting yourself slowly into the hole, because for most people it's slowly digging themselves into the hole. All the pressure of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $10,000 a month in credit card payments, and that's just the minimum payment. Then we've got that pain and suffering. Then we've got the pain and suffering of repossessions, which happens with different assets like vehicles. So then we have to go through that, and then there's the public embarrassment factor that a lot of people, whether they like to admit it or not, do feel. Like repo truck shows up in your front yard and repos your car, and all the neighbors come out and stare at you and watch for free afternoon entertainment. Like, that doesn't feel good. So there's all this pain and suffering along the way, and like we're still trying to convince ourselves at the end like we won something. We didn't. We lost, and we set ourselves back so far with all the traumas that we've got, the trigger points. There's a lot that just happened there that most people won't even look at, won't even have any awareness towards, won't unpack in any capacity, and just move on. And that will have an effect on you later, right? And so that's how you get, people like what I call crazy Uncle Eddie, that, he deals in gold only. He doesn't even really want to touch fiat currencies. He is not in the credit system at all. He's arguing about whether or not you should be paying your taxes and stuff like that. This is how those characters are created, by the way, is with how this thing is structured. So enough about that. Anyways, let's move on to the meat and potatoes of all this. All right, so here is what you can expect. This is from somebody that, like I said, filed last year, discharged this year. Before and during, let's cover that first. And I've got some bullet points, and then we'll talk about what happens after. Okay, so at first, you're gonna meet with the lawyer. This is like the biggest sit down you're gonna have. So you call them up, schedule this first sit down. You sit down with them, probably face to face. You could do it over Zoom too. That is a big change that's happened. It kind of happened since COVID, but I feel like things were gonna go there anyway. And so a lot of the stuff is like done online, to where even when you go in front of the courts, sometimes they're doing so many of them that you can't even go into a real court. You're just literally literally doing it online. This person did it online, so like the whole court proceedings, hearings, whatever, was done online, which is like, I think that takes a little bit of the stress off of it and the guilt off of it for an individual, for sure. But anyways, let's cover it. Meet with the lawyer, talk to them, and add up what you got. And at this point, you gotta kind of have your story figured out, right? You gotta have a variation of the story, whether it's the truth or not, that you've set up and you're gonna tell from this point on with the lawyer. And then there's also another individual, which is called the trustee. Now, the trustee is somebody that is gonna work kind of on your behalf, kind of in your favor, kind of not. So we'll cover that in just a second. But anyways, this is where you start. Meet with them. Next, the lawyer is going to tell you, okay, are we going to do this? We're going to move forward. If we are, stop paying everything. And then you're going to tell all the creditors and credit card companies, banks, institutions, etc., contact the lawyer. So you're going to give them his contact or her contact information, and then that's it. Kind of wash your hands of it. Stop paying everything. You can set that money aside, whatever you want to do with that, right? And they're going to be able to see this money, by the way. So all this money now that you were paying towards minimum payments and towards all these creditors, you should essentially be holding onto that money, probably not trying to hide it because they can see that. That is a big thing we'll cover in just a second. Oh, another big thing that I need to talk about is don't try and max out your credit cards. I would say 6 months or earlier before you're about to file for bankruptcy, because that actually might find its way into something called non-dischargeable debt, meaning that you would still have to pay that back. You're not gonna get away with it, okay? So if you know, like now that in 6 months we're going to, file for bankruptcy, don't go maxing out all your cards, cash advances, et cetera, and now start rolling into a bankruptcy, because this stuff that you're doing right now, these actions of maxing out your credit cards might not fall under the bankruptcy. So you gotta be very careful with that. And obviously from that point, you should not be using your credit cards at all. Cut them up or whatever you wanna do with them, but get rid of them. You're not using them at all. And like I said, don't go trying to max any of this stuff out, okay? You're not slick. They had so many people do that through the decades, through the time here, that they actually specifically look for that now. And they have no problem with making that non-dischargeable and sticking you with it, and you gotta pay it. Okay, now let's talk about what you cannot discharge, or what's called non-dischargeable debt. The big ones, student loans. I think that's pretty common knowledge now, but student loans, for the most part, federal and private, cannot be added to a bankruptcy, okay? Next is child support, alimony, spousal support. Those elements of court-ordered, essentially family support, cannot be included. Certain tax debts, like recent federal, state, local income taxes, payroll taxes, fraudulent tax returns, or willful attempts to evade taxes. Interesting. Debts from wrongful conduct, malicious injury, personal injury, death, fraud, embezzlement, larceny, crime, criminal stuff, court fees, things like that can't be included. Certain divorce and family law debts can't be included. What else do we got? Any debt not properly included in bankruptcy schedules. So if you forgot to include it and then you think that you can like magically stop paying it, that doesn't count as well. So that makes it even worse actually, because what starts to happen is we've got the bankruptcy on the credit report, as well as now we've got collections and maybe judgments put against us that are also on a credit report showing up afterwards. That is going to be much harder to get out of than if you just roll it all into the bankruptcy. So that's why I'd suggest take your time with that, really talk with the lawyer and make sure that you've got everything that you possibly can include inside of there, because some of it, like you see here, you actually cannot include. Next is after you've started the proceedings with the bankruptcy lawyer, they're going to continue to monitor your accounts. So you want to be careful with big amounts going in and out, and you don't want to be doing anything substantial for 90 days. And this is another thing that apparently is actually pretty common, okay? So the bankruptcy lawyer probably has a plethora of stories that they can tell you all about how somebody thought like after they started filing, all the cards are cut up and the proceedings are happening now. Okay, cool, I'm good and I'm in the clear. And then all of a sudden a big amount of cash finds its way into a bank account that they've shared and that has been shared with the lawyer, with, essentially the bankruptcy, and then they get themselves into trouble. And so, like I said, this is apparently a fairly common thing to where, the people that I know that did it, like when they sat down, they were told like a handful of horror stories just like this as examples as to why not to do these things. So that's why I'm sharing these with you. Okay. So anyways, next, the trustee. So you work with a trustee. I don't know, like, does the bankruptcy lawyer do this? Does the courts do this? I actually don't know who appoints them. It doesn't really matter. You can't pick. It's auto-assigned. And the trustee is kind of the person on your behalf. So you want to tell them the same story that you're telling the lawyer, and you don't want to be asking them questions like, hey, how can I hide money? And the lawyer, you really don't want to be asking these questions to either, okay? Just to be completely transparent with you. You want to be having that conversation probably with yourself if you're going to attempt to do that, okay? That being said, the trustee works on your behalf, kind of tallies up all of the assets and debt and all of that, and works with the creditors, and then they kind of all decide what's going to be included, what's not, and then that from those decisions, from data and information that they have, they're going to decide if you stay in a Chapter 7 or go to a 13 as well. That is up to the trustee and those conversations that are happening with the bankruptcy courts behind closed doors, okay? You don't want to end up behind bars, okay? So anyways, down to something that was interesting that happened was there was a potential for the IRS refund checks to go to the trustee. So the trustee actually makes money off of how much you are putting into the pile of writing off stuff. And so that is where like kind of it's like a double-ended sword. Like they're working on your behalf. I'm sure there's horror stories though of them being very aggressive and taking all your stuff because they're getting a bigger payout. I'm sure there's horror stories of that. I haven't heard of many, but if you have those, comment below, let me know. All right, so got through that. You're gonna do Zoom call with them. The very first Zoom call happens obviously after you've got the whole proceeding started and you've met with the bankruptcy lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. That first call is gonna be a long one. Expect them to ask a lot of questions, ask the same question in a lot of different ways to see how you're gonna answer it. Kind of like when you go through immigration, when you come back into the United States and ask you the same thing 5 different ways and see what kind of answer you're gonna give. Same thing here. And so just make sure you got your story straight. Whatever the story is that you're gonna say, make sure you got it straight. And so they're gonna ask you and your significant other, you know, if you're husband, wife, whatever tag team duo, they're gonna ask you guys both sets of questions, okay? And then you'll talk with them, I think like 2 or 3 more times. Obviously, you're gonna be regularly talking to the bankruptcy lawyer and working with them to make sure everything's moving forward, you know, what's gonna be included, you know, the final tally of everything, all of these finer details kind of roll out as things are moving, right? And so, as I mentioned before, you got to watch about how much equity you have in your home, how much, you know, 401ks I'm sure come into play and things like that. Shows up as an asset or equity, they might be looking at to see what classification they want to put you in terms of what chapter, okay? Another thing to keep in mind is all of your credit cards and bank accounts with those credit card establishments are going to be closed. So you will have to set up a fresh bank account. You can start to do this at any point after the proceedings, the process has already started, right? Or you can wait all the way to the end. It's entirely up to you. And what I would suggest is to do a credit union and, you know, obviously have the paychecks start to get direct deposits in there, start to build up transactional history and bonus points if they actually have a secured credit card that you could get into maybe 6-12 months down the road. But a credit union is going to be softer landing. They are going to be able to work with you with bankruptcies and derogatories on your account. They're going to care less because what they're going to be looking at more is DTI and transactional history and relationship essentially, okay? Cool, so after the bankruptcy, let's cover that and wrap up. So you're going to continue to communicate with the trustee and bankruptcy lawyer as things continue to unfold, as I already talked about. There will be an official date of discharge that is filed with the state. This is the date that the credit bureaus pick up. This is the date that the third-party aggregators pick up. It's actually the third-party aggregators that pick it up first and then report it and push it up to the 3 main credit reporting agencies. It's not the other way around, believe it or not. And so because it's public record now under your name, that is picked up, syndicated, pushed up, bang, now it's on your credit report, okay? Next, you're gonna have to, as I mentioned, go through 2 credit classes. These are online courses. It's all done through Zoom. By the way, the trustee stuff was done through Zoom. The bankruptcy court proceedings itself was done through Zoom. I assume this is kind of the standard across the boards, but maybe you might have to do some of this face-to-face and in person. You might get away with doing Zoom as well, which again, like I said, I feel for most people is like a softer landing. So that's some expectations there. And then like I said, you got the credit courses that you have to go through, the education courses. And that's pretty much it. So I'm sure there's details in there that they don't remember or I missed. I think that's pretty much a 40,000 foot view and some of what to expect if you're gonna file for it at all. I would argue that for some people, it's gonna be completely necessary. It's too far gone and you have to file for this, so go ahead. For others, doing some sort of debt consolidation, debt management company, having some debt company come in and work on your behalf to, you know, consolidate all this down into one monthly lump sum is gonna be a better option, and probably a handful of other things that you could do to try and get out of this hole first. I think it's better for your psyche to do this. I think it's better for a lot of things to do it this way versus filing for bankruptcy. And this is coming from somebody who did it and somebody who knows family members who have done it. I mean, it seems like you can't go too far down the street without meeting somebody who's filed for bankruptcy. I noticed that the regrets that everyone has is actually pretty similar. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. That is everything you need to know about filing a bankruptcy. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff to help this channel grow, and we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.